What up, folks? I knew that was going to be a good one because I am freaking amped up. Logan, welcome to the show. Podcast number 2 on the same day. This never actually usually happens. I had a busy week, and this is when I could do it, and there was no way I was not going to talk to you. How you doing, brother?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
I am so pumped that you're here. I have been ever since Michael Lee came on the podcast, and then, Kev and Mustiaki and Sab, all these guys, right? Incredible. And then recently, Dyla, every single person, not just saying this, every single person that's been associated with the Abstract brand has just been a breath of fresh air, man. It super really has. I'm not just saying this because you work for Abstract. You can go listen to my conversations. They're all there on Mikey G's blockchain. But I know this is going to be an awesome conversation. What I usually do, real quick, before we get into the nitty gritty, little just updates about me. Like I said, this is the second podcast. I was up at 5:30 a.m. getting ready for our podcast, 7 a.m. podcast.
Jeez.
I had my boy Sander on, Sander the Ape. He is building Spotify, basically built on the blockchain. This guy, serial entrepreneur, younger dude, has started multiple logistics companies, just a really cool guy. Had an amazing conversation, 2-hour conversation filled with insane insights. We talked a lot about, like, how do you interpret risk? What does balance look like? How do you build properly in Web3? How hard it is to be a builder in Web3. A lot of life moments as well, too. We're going to have some more fantastic moments.
We got to top it.
Oh, dude, we're going to have to top it. That's the goal. In addition to, I said this earlier, but Miracle, I don't know if you've heard of these guys. They're doing something really cool, which are, and by the way, this has been a burning problem in the Web3 world, and no one's done it in a beautiful, like, UI-friendly way, which is, I have hundreds of NFTs. I know thousands of dollars are being left on the table because I'm getting a perk from one of those. They're trying to bring that all together and make a very simple user interface dashboard to make sure that you don't miss these perks. Cannot wait to talk to them. That's going to be a beautiful conversation. Might be talking to some other massive IPs that I don't want to say yet because they're not 100% confirmed, but we're just having a good time. But that's enough about me. I digress. The rest is about you, Logan. And this is how we always started. We really just start by the simple, formal background. We like to do formal introductions here. So you've been in crypto for 9 years. Bazinga and Alchemy, previous. And now you're PMing at Abstract, mainly working on go-to-market stuff, right? Is that my understanding? Okay, so go-to-market for Abstract. But here's the exciting part. This dude played rock, paper, scissors with Chance the Rapper. Who would have thought, and who has that opportunity?
It's a crazy fun fact, right?
Huh?
Crazy fun fact, right?
Yeah. How does that even unfold? You're just at a party and you're like, bro, that's Chance the Rapper. Let's play some rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, you know what? We should go with that story because it's better than the real one. The real story is that he had this tour that he was going on. I think it was in Detroit or Chicago where I saw him, but he had this kind of like VIP backstage type of ticket where you got to like play rock, paper, scissors with him. And it was like a lightweight type of like meet and greet, like no photos allowed. That's like a more expensive ticket. But you know, I was coming in at that rock, paper, scissors level. So it was fun. Like I was very starstruck in that moment. That's something that's happened, a few times. Usually I try to stay pretty cool, but dude, I think I just like froze up. I didn't say a single word to him. And then I realized at the end, as I was walking away, I was like, oh my God, like I got to do something. So I like dapped him up and like, that was all that I could do as I was freaking out, but it was still cool. It's still a fun fact. I like to throw that one out there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and that was actually going to be my question because I think I told you I did a lot of the Geico commercials in the past. And so like our MO was like B, C, D list celebrities on our commercials, right? So I met a lot of cool people and it always amazed me how nice these people were. Ice-T, amazing human being, you know? and you have this vision of what they would be like. And so that was my question, but you didn't get a chance to talk to him. I was wondering if like he was super personable or not, but you were a little overwhelmed. I understand. Totally understand.
He seemed like a chill guy.
Yeah, exactly. So before we get into the world famous Mikey G and Web3 question, we're already skyrocketing in viewers. Our goal, because Logan is the man, we got to be the #1 stream on Abstract here, people. Even
Let's
if
do it.
all 40 of you right now would just go to Abstract, we'd be the #1 stream or close to it. And I know there'll be hundreds of people watching by the end. So like, retweet, comment, but click the link in the bio or the heading. Come on over to Abstract. If you comment, I can easily weave those comments into the conversation. And especially when we stop dropping life bombs and things that are going to help you level up and better your life through our life experiences in our conversation, you need to be chatting to us on Abstract, dropping how much it's impacting you. So with that being said, man, we're here. World famous Mikey G and Web3 question. Logan, how did you get to the seat you're sitting in today? And we're changing it to chapter 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to reiterate for the audience, 1, who has never seen this show, or 2, that will listen to this later on the Spotify podcast, which is chapter 1, childhood. Here, I'm very interested in vivid memories, mantras that your parents or parental figures taught you. Were you a tinkerer? Did you play sports? Start somewhere and we'll go. Chapter 2, I'm so stuck in episodes. Chapter 2, schooling, the beginning of your professional career. Did you go straight into entrepreneurship? What did that look like? But here, remember, in these frame of mind, I'm really interested in your failures more than your successes, because the failures give you the insights and the way to learn, grow. And I'm a firm believer, if you're not learning, growing, you're actually starting to die, because these are the moments that we want to share with each other to help each other out. Chapter 3, obviously Web3. Let's get into how you found it, and then we'll go to the big, green, beautiful, shiny object. What is Abstract? So that's it, man. Let's start with chapter 1. Anywhere you want to start, let's have at it, brother.
Awesome. Easy enough. Great questions, Mikey. I love this format. I'm excited to open up, get a little bit vulnerable. Hopefully somebody out there can get some value out of this, and just want to put it out there. If anybody is listening, finds value, feel free to reach out to us. I'd be happy to do a one-on-one with anybody who wants to kind of like dive deeper or get some like personal advice, open offer. Ooh. So I think like
what wait, real quick though. Sorry to chime in. That already speaks volume of who you are as a human being. I think you're so many experienced people on this show. You're the first one that's ever started out that way. So thank you for saying that, man. Where does that come from? I'm just going to go off script right now. Where does that come from?
Oh boy, I mean, I think like we Abstract doesn't have anything. We don't have anything without the community. Like, we're building this for people, and we're building it with the feedback of people. I think like if I'm doing my job well, my best skill is listening, right? So I really want to be in the trenches, kind of like shoulder to shoulder with everybody out there. And like, to grow an ecosystem, you have to be a part of that ecosystem. So like I try as much as I can to be as much in the trenches as everybody else. I think, there's nothing that suggests to me that any of us are different from one another. So, there was always people that were willing to give me their time. There was always people that were super generous with their time and would help me along the way. And so just trying to like pay that forward, I think a little bit is something that's fulfilling to me personally. And then, hopefully the other person could get something out of it as well.
Dude, beautiful insight. And this comes up time and time again on the podcast, man. I just don't really think at the end of the day, there's any other way to live than to pay it forward and be kind. It's one of the main pillars of what I do. And it's this. And Gary V's and a lot of other people say this is because true happiness comes with a smile on your face at the end of the day. That's what it boils down to. And that is a product of trying to accomplish this. So thank you so much for sharing that, man. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So let's go to the childhood, man. Where do you want to start?
Yeah. So I thought about this a little bit. I think the story that I want to tell is like the one where, I was super young, like definitely single digits age, and my dad introduced me to martial arts, specifically this form of karate called Shotokan. It's a Japanese striking style, and I basically kind of like grew up in the dojo. Um, that was like one of the things that my dad and I always bonded over, and he would come pick me up from after school club, kids club, and he would take me to karate. And one of the things that we would always talk about is like stocks and finance. Oddly enough, as soon as I stopped reading the Captain Underpants books, and I kind of started asking him some questions, and he had a lot of like great insights for me. So I was always very curious about the process of like of finance and technology. And so yeah, like I kind of want to turn it over to you there. That's like the OG core memory that kind of set me on this trajectory of tech and finance and the intersection between those two things.
So, like I said, I just needed those two sentences. You already taught me a ton of stuff about you, which is one is martial arts. So my co-founder that started this podcast with me, who's concentrating on real estate, which is part of our grand company plan takeover of the world. Uh, he did Taekwondo, and I think he almost made the Junior Olympics too. But his interpretation of martial arts is very different than what the media glorifies it as, which is like fighting and being tough. What is your interpretation of what you learned through martial arts? I'm really interested on what your take would be.
Yeah, I think like the goal of martial arts is to never have to use it. Like I think it teaches hyper awareness and vigilance and discipline. But the goal is always to not use it, right? If you have to use it, then you kind of messed up at some point.
I 100% agree. And that's what he says all of the time. When looking back, because what we do here is a lot of reflecting, de-escalation, not having to use it. What are some of the tricks or the number one tricks or things that you think about when you are in those moments in time where you have to think about de-escalating things?
Yeah, I think like everybody has an angle, everybody has needs. And so, perhaps there's like a conversational way that we can figure out a solution, right? I think um, I try to, empathize as much as I can, put myself into their shoes and say, okay, well, if this person is angry about, such and such, then maybe there's something I could do for them. I think that's a lot more of a constructive approach. Um, and yeah, thankfully it's worked so far.
Yeah, and I think like this is a fascinating topic in itself because Web3 needs more of this, right? It is so well, there's two things, and I would love, like, even though I know we talk about Web3 later, I think this is a very poignant topic, which is like de-escalation, trying to understand one, why someone's pissed off, and then two, which happens in discords all the time, you're banned, see you later, not even like trying to understand the conversation. A lot of this happens because you're behind the screen. What's your take on why this might happen more in Web3? Is it just because the detachment of technology? Are people so amped up about the money that they can make? Do you have experiences about having to deal with this throughout your time?
Yeah, it's a super interesting question. I think given the history of Web3 and all of the airdrops that have happened and all of the different, money making opportunities, people have, primarily one reason to enter Web3, and that's
Yeah.
profit seeking. And so for some people, that's a great thing. For some people, they're willing to hurt others to get there. So I think it's like sometimes you have to understand that the needs and incentives of that person who's causing a ruckus is because potentially they're trying to take care of their family, and other times it's like because they're trying to grift or to scam, and often that sense of entitlement seems to me to be more of from the latter, where it's the people who are trying to grift, people who are trying to scam. I think they're the ones who are often like the most vocal about like whatever opinion that they have. um, I don't know. Curious, what are your thoughts there?
So I love that you bring this up. And one, I think absolutely the grifters, but there's people that are so good at covering up that they're grifters. uh, it's hard. Like that's kind of a thing that I don't know what you have to do. You have to make your best judgment. But one thing that you said that I think people need to think about more is, and this opened up my eyes when I was in the like original Hate Beast mod, right? And this server exploded so quick. And then I started realizing, I'm like, holy crap. If you sell one hate in parts of this world, that is life-changing money. Like not I'm good for 6 months, like I'm good for a decade type money. And I just didn't have that context. And I think you saying that is what the message is that many people need to hear, is that even though we know in our head this space is insanely diverse, we still, and I think in our head, surround ourselves with like people that we're just used to dealing with. And just, you have to really ground yourself in the perspective of just how many people have access to this really cool microcosm of a moment, and that there are many motivations for people to be here. Yes, making money being the number one, but you just don't know somebody's situation. That's what resonated with me with what you said. Any other thoughts there? Make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it takes a certain level of humility that a lot of people unfortunately don't have. But yeah, we can work on it. It's not a lost cause.
Yeah, for sure. And I think honestly, that's what keeps me going, right? Because if there aren't people like us that don't do it, then the world ends really, really badly, really, really quickly. So I just have to have glass half full, and we need glass half full type of people, or else we're in real trouble, especially with the advent technology of AI and everything that's about to happen. I think, and this is the other thing that people don't realize, in less than a year, things are really fundamentally going to change. People are like, oh, that's 5 to 10 years off. I'm like, guys, you people don't understand. It's going to quickly happen. So back to your childhood, though. You also said many other interesting things. You mentioned your father. And it seems like even by the small amount that you talked about, you were looking at to him as a mentor and a leader and asking him about trading, finance. Let's not get to the trading finance part. What did you learn from your upbringing as far as, now, I don't need like, very rarely does your parents say like, be kind and pay it forward and drill it into your head multiple times. I'm more interested in reflecting back. What are some of these characteristics you think you picked up from your upbringing through kind of your parental influential figures?
Yeah, I think like one of the big things that I've realized looking back is just the leadership by example, right? Like that's something that, it's much easier to just like yap and be like the armchair philosopher. I think it's a lot harder to like be quiet and let the actions speak for you. But oftentimes he took that approach, and like now looking back on it, I'm like, oh, maybe he was onto something there, right?
Right. And I think that is absolutely one of the things. I actually just tweeted about this a couple days ago, which is, and it just has to be in these small microdoses of just do something, right? Just do, it can be a little thing, but even doing something like opening up, this is something simple. How often does a dude open up a door for a lady this day and age? That little act of kindness to somebody that you love can make a profound impact on somebody, right? And that's leading through an example. What do you think recently that people could relate to, or either you've done it or experiences that you have been impacted yourself of people leading by examples? Because I love this topic. I think it's fascinating.
What's the question?
So leading by example, what are some practical, tangible experiences of, one, something you've done, or two, something you've witnessed somebody done that has resonated with you?
Yeah, kind of to circle back to the earlier point is being generous with my time. I'll give a shout out to Michael Lee here. Is like,
Yes.
the dude is infinitely generous with his time, and he's given that time to me, and I've taken away a lot of valuable lessons from it. And so yeah, it's about paying it forward and trying to put the community on. I think something that I've realized, especially like in the crypto Twitter space, is that you can make a bold post about yourself and it will get 5 likes. You can make a bold post about somebody else and it will get 500 likes, because people love that kind of selflessness and willingness to put on for other people.
Love it, man. Love it. And I was about to say, Michael Lee's a prime example. You know, God knows, only knows how busy he is, and I just linked up with him in DMs, which he's already talked about how he's a stickler at answering as many DMs as possible, and is almost like his nightly routine. And our intro call that we had, right? Dude, that thing was almost like 2 hours, right? Because we just couldn't stop, and it was just
That's
a wealth
awesome.
of knowledge. And I obviously had a wealth of knowledge talking to all the different people we talked about. Thinking about back now, more kind of growing and evolving in the childhood thing, what were you into, right? Like, were you a tinkerer? Did you play video games? Did you play sports? Because I think these now activities on the activity side definitely have an impact on you. So what did that look like?
Yeah, I was very much like the Pokemon card collector. I think, I'm still very much a collector of probably too much junk. But then also, yeah, playing a ton of video games, like learning how to like open up a port on my Wi-Fi router for Minecraft servers, or like,
Yeah,
building my own gaming PC. That was actually kind of my introduction to Bitcoin mining computers, was through that gaming PC I was building. And here we are today. So yeah, I think
dude.
like all of these different little parts of who I was as a child are super important to like integrate it and to keep in mind. You know, um, the creative adult is the child that never stopped being a child, right? I
Right.
think a lot of the most effective people have that, cultural understanding, and that comes from not shying away from, the fun things that they like to do as a kid.
Yeah. So, dude, you nailed it. Brought up one of my favorite subjects of all time, which is creativity. I just think it's something people do not talk about enough. And unfortunately, I think it's going to get worse with AI, because people's interpretation of creativity is making a video or a movie or a piece of art, which is all going to be able to be done by a computer at a very high quality. I have my own thoughts on creativity. I would love to hear your perception of what you think creativity is, and what do you do to be creative?
Yeah, I'd push back on that AI bit just for the sake of conversation. I think like all technology, it can be a crutch or a ladder. So,
Mhm.
perhaps AI actually lowers the barrier to entry to be creative and to express your creativity. So maybe
Correct.
in some sense, it like supercharges the creative process for like 8 billion people. And maybe that ends up with a much more creative world and a much more creative society and culture than we've had before. Um,
I love that take, by the way. I love that take. I think the angle that I was coming from is that the perception of creativity, because I think schooling and from a young age where kids are hyper creative, they're put into a box. If they're not a good painter or drawer or can make art, then they're not creative, which is not even close to the case, right? But you make a fantastic argument that it democratizes the access to make what are quote unquote creative things, which unlocks a whole new potential of creativity. So I like that point. I'll hear you on that, but I'll still push back, and I think we define creativity different. And what hence the original question is, or not me and you define creativity different. I think we define creativity in the wrong way, and I think there's a misconception of it. So I am interested in your take on creativity.
Yeah, I've thought about this one a bit. The best answer that I have is curation. It's the ability to like, this is something that Virgil Abloh would talk about all the time, is like this 3% rule. Like if you can just change something 3%, that's enough for it to be new. Like there's an argument that people make all the time. I'm not sure if I like it or not. It's like nothing is new. You can't do anything new. I kind of don't like it, because I think that probably stops people from trying. So I'll say like there are plenty of new things, but it's not new in the sense of like an entire novelty, or like you don't have to be Steve Jobs. You can just change something a little bit in a way that you like, and put it out there. And if you're willing to be vulnerable and put something out there in an interpretation or a curative style that you like, hopefully people will latch on to that.
Yeah, dude. And I say this all of the time, by the way. Entrepreneurship's the great example, right? Everyone thinks they need to be Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. And it's like, absolutely not. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a full-time job, a family, and I have a side hustle, right? And I've made money and I love what I do. And I'm insanely fulfilled. You don't need to be a multi-billionaire. But ultimately, what you said too was just try something and put it out into the world. And you cannot acquire creativity by just thinking beautiful thoughts and drawing things down. I actually think painting and drawing is a tool set for creativity. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, for sure. I think like another good definition for creativity is honesty. Like that's perhaps maybe the best one is like if you're being
Mm,
honest and vulnerable with what you put out there, like that is the creativity that people recognize as creativity that latch onto. I think like I would rather be early and have to wait for validation than be late and be the nth copy of whoever else has already done that. So it is that vulnerability. It is that like willingness to be cringe and like I'll go so far as to say like seeking cringe is actually a great mindset for, I think the younger generation where it's like, oh, that's cringe. Don't do that. But like, what if we went to the opposite extreme? Like, who would you be in that case? I think that's an interesting kind of philosophy to explore as an individual.
Okay, so this is me as a boomer interpreting your cringe talk and the opposite of cringe. First off, talk to me. I understand the concept of cringe, but speaking cringe, little lost on me. So, like, what is
Seeking,
speaking cringe?
seeking,
Oh,
seeking.
seeking cringe. I thought you
Yep.
were like speaking cringe. I was like, I don't know. Just being awkward. What would be the way of speaking cringe? So, what do you mean by the opposite of seeking cringe? Like, what would that look like? Or were you just making a point that always look at the opposite of what people are trying to do? Is that the point you were trying to make?
No, I think it's like there's this trend in Gen Z culture where it's like, oh, you want to be like the nonchalant guy, like the Sigma male that's like does his own thing and is like makes money online and like sits in the corner of the room mysteriously. But like
Mm,
if everybody did that, then the vibe would be whack. Like we need leaders probably more than we need like the nonchalant guys these days. So like being that, cringe one who's like says something in the elevator or like opens up the conversation or like asks a question about somebody's outfit. Like, I think
gotcha.
that more often than not, in my experience, is like that actually leads to the optimal outcome in some sort of like social environment.
Product of being insanely cringy my entire life. I would absolutely attribute a lot of my success and my interpretation and my generation of cringe is actually just striking up a conversation when most people don't expect it, right? And the best, other than this deep listening skill that I was telling you that I've built, the only other better thing that I've ever done in my life is sat on the hundreds of intro calls that I've had to vet people and do the BD on the back end of getting people on this show. By far, decades of information and knowledge that I've got just by doing that. And I would have never reached out. I would have never been able to do it by having maybe some cringe intros because I didn't really know what I was doing in the beginning, right? I didn't know, like, there's actually an art to reaching out to people too. And you would never learn this without doing it. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. But I also think that like that inexperience is something that's hyper relatable to all successful people.
Yes.
And so it's not something to be afraid of. It's actually potentially an asset. And if leveraged correctly, it can open a lot of doors for you.
Oh, dude, 1,000%. Do you see what we're doing here, man?
No, this is phenomenal.
You've already dropped multiple bombs, by the way. Creativity is just such a fascinating because there's not, like I said, I've talked to hundreds of people. There has not been one person that has given their take on a creativity that's been exactly the same. The themes are the same, which are like you just need to do something and take a risk and try something new because that's where the creativity comes out. But how you explained it was completely different. One more thing about creativity, which I'm interested in, is because it can come in. How do you get into that mode, right? Like I think there is a zone for people always talk about being in the zone for sports. I think there's a zone for creativity. I think there's a zone for just content creation in general, or a zone for a skill set that you're doing. And like I explained, when I sit down in this chair and I'm about to hit that enter the studio, and I know you're most likely waiting there for me to start this whole experience, I'm locked in, bro. And I am just so freaking excited, right? So you might not get to that level, but how do you get into your kind of creative zone? Do you have any tactics? What do you like to do? Because this can come in so many different forms.
Yeah, I think for me the biggest thing is kind of like a destimulation routine, or like taking a
Ooh,
walk, or like intentionally like putting the phone away, like kind of just letting my mind wander and like work through all of the things that are being processed by my subconscious but aren't conscious yet. I think like taking that time to like let your brain tell you what it's doing and feeling and thinking. It's oftentimes like super uncomfortable, because you have to kind of face the truth. You have to face the reality of like where your head is actually at. But I think like after 30 minutes of sitting there with yourself, you kind of start to have, or at least for me personally, and I do think it is very person to person, is like that's where my best ideas come from, is like when I do nothing for long enough to start actually integrating the thoughts and the experiences and the memories. Then I'll think about the things that I'm working on, and like I'll get
right,
my best ideas, kind of like that late night walk that I try to take as many days as I can when it's not raining, is like that's where all my best ideas come from.
right, right. And I think what you said, and it's actually what happens on this podcast too, right? Is there's two things by me intentionally um not prepping you and making sure you only have one question, and intentionally telling you to not think is, and you've heard this time and time again, when do some of the most creative thoughts happen? When you're in the shower, when you're taking a walk, when you're intentionally trying to detach from the things that are going on, because that's when the mind starts kind of racing and doing some real, like it's like putting the gaps together somehow. I don't know what's happening, but it happens to me, and many other people say that. I think people need to understand just the power and the importance of that, because I think another misinterpretation of creativity is like, okay, I need to sit down and now be creative. And that's just not really how it works usually. So, fascinating insight, man. All of this is fascinating. We have 160 people watching, close to 200, but here's the problem, bro. We have 8 people watching on Abstract. If I just get 50 of you to come over to Abstract, we would be the #1 stream on Abstract right now. The link is in the title. Just click the darn link, people. Come on over, chat. I've already got 4 questions that I'm going to already weaved one of them naturally into the conversation. And we're going to do that more. We've already talked about creativity. We've talked about all of these other amazing things, and you're just leveling up every second that goes by on this podcast. What were you going to say, man?
Here's what we got to do. We got to draw a boundary. I'm only going to take calls and answer questions from those in the Abstract chat.
Ooh, boom, right there. We just put the stake in the sand, people. Only in Abstract will we take questions. So come on over and give us some questions. All right. So only other thing I would love to do before we kind of get to chapter 2, you mentioned video games. You mentioned a couple other things. If you don't want to click down on anything, I think we've already covered some really interesting things already. Anything else from like that, we're now into high school and college. If you went to college, before we get there, anything else you want to cover that has kind of percolated in the mind over what we've talked? If not, totally cool. We'll move to chapter 2.
I think there's something interesting I'd love to kind of dive into with you about this idea of like destimulation, and especially in the context of Gen Z. I think that, I imagine that, 40 years ago, people had nothing to do but sit with their thoughts, and like it would make this creative process really easy. But in today's world, it's actually very kind of counterculture or counterintuitive to destimulate. And it's
Yep.
it's definitely the hard path, it's the hard road.
Yep.
The easiest thing to do is just to keep scrolling. And you know, sometimes I would be like, you know, making excuses for myself to keep scrolling, where it's like, oh, just more training data, I'm gonna learn more things. You want to go fix that?
That's just knocked over and almost killed my dog. I told you I'd screw this podcast up.
No. This is awesome.
Hold on, real impromptu. Luckily my mic was muted because that was a pretty large crash.
Just make sure everything's okay. No dogs injured. I'm not going anywhere. Leave it to Mikey G to stage the green screen falling over to just get us deeper into the conversation.
We were just talking about distractions, right? And this is by far a distraction. Hold on. There's a little leg stitch I need to adjust. There it is. When I push my chair back, the leg stabilizes this thing. Got kicked under. So that was fantastic. Good. Chat is laughing. They actually thought that was highly entertaining. This is going to make a great blooper for the future. But dude, you were asking such a profound, amazing question. So I think let's just recap it. And towards the end, we were kind of really talking about you're scrolling and you know that you shouldn't be doing that, but you're still doing it. And the attention in the Gen Z world versus my generation is drastically different. And this is a fascinating conversation. So go ahead and finish off any other thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's like there's a good question that I had to ask myself at some point, which is like, what's the purpose of information that I can't put to use or that I'm not putting to use? So it's like, it's okay to like be uninformed about some things. I think there's also like kind of building on this. There's kind of this like, since we have a library of Alexandria in our pockets, like we can Google anything. There has become over the past, I think, 10 years, this weird social expectation where like if you have to Google something or you don't know it already, then like that's a bad thing. But yeah, like I think that's kind of a stupid philosophy. Like it's more about execution. It's more about what you add and what you contribute, and that requires like intentional destimulation. So you know, I'd encourage anybody who's been on their phone for the past 5 years straight, like go take a walk, leave your phone behind, bring a notepad, whatever you got to do. You have to figure out like exactly what works for you. It is very individual. For me, that's like taking a walk, like intentionally not doing anything. Maybe the first 5-10 minutes I'll like listen to some music to get myself into the zone, but then like I cut it off and I'll just try to like process everything that's on my mind and then kind of like let my brain cook a little bit. And then I have this, like I text myself more than I text anybody else. So like whenever I have these things throughout the day or these thoughts, like I'll just text myself and then I can go back and handle it later. But the process of like, one, giving yourself that mental space to have these ideas, and then two, providing like a system or a mechanism for like putting them down into words really quickly and then you know, moving on to the next thing. I think the combination of those two things is like where I probably get all my best ideas from.
Dude, so I could go in so many directions for this fascinating topic. So we obviously know now, right? There are very, very smart people in Silicon Valley and in the tech companies that have engineered this dopamine rush, right? So, and we also know that that was engineered to make trillions of dollars. So they're monetizing you. So you now have this realization that maybe in the beginning you didn't have as much context, but now we have that context. My generation, and here's the thing I think about all the time, man. And of course, reflecting back, you don't think about how profoundly impactful this is on your brain. But I have seen, and this is where we're going to get into this Gen Z conversation, because this is, and I say this often on the show, life is grays, man. I think part of the thing, and this is, again, intentionally engineered on the internet, being decisive in saying black or white comments gets more clicks. It gets more interactions. But life is not like that. It's very rare other than like me straight up murdering you in the street. Obviously, that's a bad thing, but it's very rare that these things that we're talking about, there's really a right or wrong. There's so many perspectives and perceptions. But what I'm getting at about the play thing is, I and I think there was a fascinating article from. Did you ever hear or listen to the show Radio Lab? It was on NPR.
It sounds familiar, but I can't say that I know it.
These guys are fantastic, right? And basically, they would take a concept, and in this one, they talked about the influence of the internet and the 24/7 news cycle, and they would break it down from a scientific perspective. And the whole concept was, they looked at a small town in Michigan over a 20-year research cycle. And when they started, and this is what I grew up with, dude, I could play like a mile from my house. I would literally tell my mom, like, gone 10 a.m. I'd be home at 6, and she wouldn't even question or be scared, right? Because that's just what you did. 20 years later, because of your access to information in this news cycle, kids aren't allowed to go off their front freaking lawn, man. And what the science part of it was interesting is that town got 50% safer over time. But the perception was the world's falling apart. So I think this is another example of what you're saying. Detaching yourself from technology is so critical for creativity, I think, more than anything else. And so what I was doing, like, listen, man, when I watched Radio Flyer, which is an old school movie about, I mean, it's actually kind of a dark movie, but they built a plane out of a radio flyer and it flew, right? Instead of me like going on the internet researching and or being prompted to go play a video game, me and my buddy went and bought a wagon and we built a radio flyer because we were convinced we were going to fly, man. And we built a ramp in his backyard. And like, I spent so much time building tree forts and actually building things that it is by far impacted my life over my career on how to think differently. I 100% agree. I 100% not agree, but I 100% believe in this. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think there's something to like that trust element between the parent and the child, where the parent trusts the kid to go out there. Obviously, like, I can imagine that's scary for any parent, but at some point you get used to it. For me, it was like, taking my dog off the leash at the pier. It's like,
Yes.
it's New York City. Like, theoretically he could run into traffic, but like, the first time it was really, really scary for me to take the dog off that leash. And I had to, run after him a few times. But pretty quickly he picked up on like the boundaries and then learned how to play within those boundaries. I think, the issue with the hover parenting is that the kids don't learn how to play within the boundaries of the world. And that leads to, ineffectivity, or, kids not knowing how to operate, what the boundaries are. And then they get really burned by that down the road. So it's something that I'm, thinking about all the time, is like, oh, how would I handle this? If and when I become a parent, like, what will my kids have access to? Will they be iPad kids? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Like, I think it's a bad thing, but then it's like, oh, am I not trusting them? So, I think it is trying to, give that trust kind of at all costs. But, also being present enough to help them work through whatever experiences that they run into.
Yeah, and I think you brought up another really good point, which I'm interested on your thoughts on here, which is a very big word, which is trust. And I think this is a day and age where it's easy to be so flippant because there's a new shiny object, and it's harder. By the way, all of this, a lot of times, these themes boil down to people don't like to take the harder path. They like to take the easier route out. And trust is the same thing, right? To earn trust, I had to prove to my mom multiple times that she could continue to let me go out more and more. But her belief that I was just a good-hearted kid and I wasn't going to be a dick about things, right? Because I was even though I would hang out with some people that would get in trouble, and there's no way she wasn't finding out, she trusted that I was going to make the right thing, right? And do the right thing. So trust is a huge thing. It also levers up to Web3 too. and this is a prime example. Now, I would love your thoughts on just this whole concept of trust, whether it's in Web3 or a Gen Z take on it. And this, I think, again, comes from back to how I grew up. It was very clear to me in 2021, 2020. I was a hate beast mod, man. Like overnight, I had 10,000 plus followers from like 500. But since then, I've only grown about 3,000 followers because I didn't take any dollar in my DMs that was like $1,500 for a retweet. I knew a lot of people that did. And I have always said my trust at the end of all this in this big long run, that is so much more valuable in terms of dollars, in terms of brand, than getting that instant quick fix. And I think technology has made the shiny object so much easier to get. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's like if you know, I don't use TikTok, but I'm familiar with what the content is. And it's like, you know, drop shipping billionaire, fucking Andrew Tate, like the one after another. They're just like these insane expectations of being able to make billions of internet dollars overnight, that the, you know, all of the hard work, which is actually where the dollars come from, that's not sexy. So that's not what gets clipped. And so, yeah, I think like deconnecting from that stimulation is often very helpful for my generation.
Let's get into the generational perspectives that we were talking about, because you did want to talk about this, which is I am sometimes perplexed by the Gen Z compared to what, and Michael and Leah, I talked about it, I'm sure he's talked about it yourself, of like, we've seen Web3 is just the latest version of what we saw with .com. And then before .com, like the emergence of the cell phone, the actual beginning of the internet, like the you know, AOL chat rooms back in 1995. So I would think our generation is really defined by adaptability and like understanding change. And you have the decision each time here, right? Like, especially people my age, they're like, oh, you're in crypto, you're a scammer, you don't even know what you're doing. And it's like, guys, if you don't see that this is the next evolution of like how you need to live your life, you're out of your mind, right? But luckily, I've never fought against it. And there's a lot of people that fight against it. Your generation, which is interesting, is because we work together now as colleagues in Web3. I've actually led really big teams with a lot of younger people. And I see two cohorts. I've had some trouble in the past, which is the typical thing that you would see is like, there might have been a little more entitlement that maybe should be, that things were expected. Oh, if I do X, Y, and Z, I should get promoted. And it's like, people, before I got my first promotion, I did the job of the next level for 5 years. And then I got the promotion, right? It's not like a simple checklist and then all of a sudden you should get X, Y, and Z. But then I see yourself and all of these other young 20-somethings like Exceed from K's just hustling and have already started multiple companies, have failed so many times. And there's just this like juxtaposition to me. So I would just love for you to talk about your perceptions of Gen Z, where you think you guys are headed as a generation, what you're good at, what you could be better at. I'm interested in this take.
I want to tie this into something I said earlier, which is technology can either be a crutch or a ladder. I think that the technology has basically widened the gap between those who take the main street and those who take the road less traveled, right? So I think what we see with Gen Z, who, you know, obviously I have infinite empathy for Gen Z. Like we have this meme, like lock in or crash out. And that's kind of exactly what happens.
Yeah.
It's like kids either lock in or they crash out. I also think that something that's misunderstood about Gen Z is that they have a very much an uphill battle. The economic times, the inflation,
100%.
the, you know, AI taking away all entry level jobs, the, you know, lack of clear direction from any of the education they received from anywhere in their childhood. These are all, you know, these are all things that contribute to a sense of being lost. And so what I see is like even some of the, future billionaires of my high school friend group are just entirely lost, right? And I think they can't seem to pinpoint what it's all for, or what's really valuable. And without very clear definitions for those things, it's very hard to operate. So that's what I often ask them, is like, what's your purpose? Like, what are your principles? What are your frameworks? Like, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do that? What happens when you get $100 million? Then what do you do? And so I'm just trying to push them to think about the deeper underlying meaning that I think, at large, we were basically never taught.
Bro, such an amazing insight. And I think a lot of this comes from my generation of this being lost is such a critical insight that I haven't really thought a lot about. Like, I've kind of like subconsciously thought that like there's just been a ton of adversity, right? Like, and it's a lot through the messaging, like global warming is a thing, right? There is world economies. We're so more connected than ever before. You have this instant access, and hey, guess what gets a lot more clicks than love? A lot of times hate, right? So you're seeing all these like super adverse, extreme opinions. And so this sense of self is huge. And I'm interested from your age, because I'll tell you my experience. Not until I found, and I actually never felt like I've had a true mentor. I've kind of taken snippets from leaders, like, but I've never had a leader that I'm like, I want to be that person and tell me everything that you know, right? I've had good leaders that have been really good at things, but really bad at things. And I've kind of taken those over time. But true self-awareness and purpose starts with you. And I didn't get that until I had the life experience of a major depressive order, and I was forced to go through that. So I think there's many ways to get there. What is your narrative at your age of like how you find self-awareness? Are you thinking that generation is more leaning on somebody spoon feeding that to them, or they just not really realizing or have the years behind them yet to realize a lot of this product comes from doing and self-realization on your own? Clip this, people. You clip me knocking my green screen down. Now you're gonna clip Logan disconnecting from the stream. So we've got two monumental moments of bloopers on this stream. I love it. There we go. He just peaced out, man. I don't know where he is. Hold on. I'm gonna get him back. You there, bro? Uh-oh. I think his microphone died because he's been holding it the whole time.
Yo, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yo. Yeah, I just had to stage that so you wouldn't feel bad about the green screen.
I said we got people clipping that too. We've got two follies throughout the podcast. We're money in the bank. We're going to be taking over the internet because of this. Okay, you good?
Yeah, good. Where were we?
Okay, so I was saying that mine came from hard knock life and self-awareness, right? And you were talking about your generation of this like lost sense of purpose.
Yep.
And my question to you is back to you of, at your age, how do you define this, or how do you even, when you're having these conversations with your friends, start unpacking what does purpose mean? How do you acquire that, right? Like, what does that conversation even look like?
Yeah, I think about this all the time. I try a different approach every time, and I try to iterate. Each person is a different nut to crack, and I think meeting the 100%. Person where they're at is the most empathetic thing you could do. But I think usually it all boils down to love, right? And if you want to define that as some sort of higher power, like, that's great. You have to be an individual. You have to work with what works with you. That's something that I do personally, is like, I have gone down that path, and but I don't think like you need to get into the philosophies or the religions in order to connect with somebody over the concept of love. I think that the people around you, the connections you make, the experiences you have, those are worth more than any sort of dollar value. And if you ask somebody what happens when you get $100 million, they say, well, I'm just gonna hang out with the people I love. And it's like, oh, there you go. So sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes people, like good friends, take months to crack. But yeah, it can be pretty simple, I think.
Yes. So I think that I agree with that. One of the things that I think, and I don't know if you talk about, but I'm a firm believer, is to actually convey love, to actually come to that purpose. And I think it is you centering on, I agree with you. I think it's love, being kind, and paying it forward. It's one of the pillars of what I do. But there's two things here that I think are critical for you to get to that point. One, pure self-awareness. So you need to understand yourself as a human being and how you can convey love in your own way. And then two, whatever that purpose ends up being, I don't think you can fully bring it to fruition unless you find an outlet or a vehicle to do that. And so my version is lost art of genuine human connection. I deeply love people. I deeply care about how people think. I think it's fascinating. And I have a podcast as an outlet. Like, that's my equation, right? Does that all resonate with you? Does that make sense? Any thoughts?
No, I love it. I love it. I can empathize and relate to that a lot.
Yeah. And I think that's the last question. Then we can kind of roll into chapter 3 in Web3, which is...
We skipped chapter 2.
Oh, shoot, man. We're already... What you got to go? Because we just went on in such a tangent. We did.
No, it's okay. This was great. This is great. I'll make chapter 2 and 3 more quick.
No. We're just going to have multiple more conversations. This is how great it is. We've already been talking for over an hour, and I feel like we didn't even start. But I do want this one question. We'll go into chapter 2, which is self-awareness, man. This is so critical. And I think it takes a lifetime to truly understand self-awareness, right? I'm still cracking the nut on it. So for yourself, and then if you want to generate a generational perspective, you can. If not, mainly just for yourself. What does self-awareness mean to you, and how do you try to acquire that?
I want to tie this into the creativity conversation earlier, because I think that self-awareness and the self-awareness and the creativity are kind of one and the same. And the way to, procure that self-awareness or maintain that self-awareness or work towards becoming more self-aware is just to disconnect and to sit with your thoughts and to, allow your brain to work out the things that you encounter in life. And so, yeah, I think it can be pretty simple, but it does seem to be pretty scary at the beginning, especially if you have like a lot of unprocessed stuff. Like, the longer you delay, the more unprocessed stuff you have. And so it can be very difficult for people who have never done it to do it for the first time. Usually I agree with you. Like, you have to have your back against the wall. That's where you get, the most critical insights and the most self-awareness. You have no other option but to be self-aware, right?
Yeah, man. And you said the last part, I think you hit the nail on the head. The reason why it's so difficult for people, and I'm firmly convinced you can't really become your true self or see your true potential or full potential until you have these conversations. But it's a deep, intimate conversation with yourself. And you have to be okay with telling yourself the hard truths and then work those out and figure out how to get better. And my advice to all of your younger people listening, and I've said this often throughout the podcast, do not take my path, which was avoiding everything, self-internalizing, and then just letting it explode your brain in your 30s. Because that gets you up to an extreme back against the wall that manifests in, like, you've got to make some life death decisions. Highly recommend not to do that. So what you said at the end resonated with me so deeply, because that's exactly it. And that's the hard part. And that's why I think a lot of people avoid it. So just lesson learned. You can see how excited and how much I love life and I found my purpose, but it came from a very, very difficult time. And it's just something you have. And if you work at it earlier, obviously when you're 10 years old, you're not thinking about this. But as you get into college, as you get into your early 20s, I think it's something everybody should be thinking about is, who am I as an individual? What is my superpower? What do I lack at? Do I want to spend time improving that? Or am I comfortable just doubling down on my superpower? And how do I evolve as a human being? You have to have that conversation.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit earlier on the last show I did, and it's like, how do you know what your superpower is? I think a lot of people struggle with that, especially in Gen Z, is like knowing which direction to aim in, because all of these ideas and concepts and paths to get a private jet are presented to us basically nonstop. It's like, oh well, then which one should I choose? What's hot right now? Is drop shipping back? Is our NFTs back?
Yeah.
I think this is like a interesting thought that we got to on the last show, was that you just have to trust your instinct. You have to be willing to work for free. You have to be willing to prove yourself, but just kind of following your curiosity, following your instinct. And then the big key for me is not overthinking it. Right? I think you just have to try something. And like, if you knew you were 100 failures away from success, you'd try to get to that first failure as quickly as possible. Right. So yeah, not being afraid, like just stop overthinking things, just do something, pick anything and like try it. And like, just, you'll be impressed by how much you can do, especially with AI to help you. Like any of these kind of concepts or paths that, Gen Z wants to go down, they totally can, but most aren't aware of that because they're a little bit too shy to give it a go.
Yeah. And what you hit is the nail on the head, man. It is just trying things. Because I hear this all the time. Even Gary Vee talks about this a lot, right? And there's younger people that say, I'm not good at anything. I'm not passionate at anything. I'm not, I don't know my superpower. And I'm like, well, there's just a simple solution to that. Try new things all day long until something resonates with you. It's just that simple. But the other thing that you said, and studies have proven this time and time again, there is this saying, right? Like money doesn't guarantee happiness, but having no money can guarantee misery, right? And yes, listen, you need a roof over your head and food on the table. But the billionaire private jet, I've had multiple people on this podcast that had the private jet and acquired that in their 40s. And they were like, I felt so empty once I sat on that plane. And so that's the other thing, is this over fantastical, like, I'm not thinking of the world, but just like glorification of this rich private jet flight style. And if you're chasing that and that is the one main thing, game over. So I think the conversation that you came to, and this is another thing that I'm just so fascinated at your age, I wasn't even thinking about these concepts, right? And so, but I think it goes back to the product of this generation of like, more than ever, you're forced to think about these things, right? Because if you're not, what is the other alternative with tech taking over everything, basically,
It's not bright.
It's not. Beautiful conversation, man. We're going to reset here. While I'm resetting, Soul wants you to show the pudgy penguin behind you. They're very interested in what that plushie looks like. It's simple. It's cute. It's beautiful. And we've got everybody clipping me knocking over my green screen, you having a little mishap yourself. We also have a comment on when are you turning that hat into a grind hat? That is interesting. And then as we get into crypto, this is one of the questions. We don't have to answer it now, but people are interested in your biggest mistake in your Web3 journey. But before we get there, we're going to reset the room. I don't even know how much people this is again, you almost have 200 people watching on Twitter. We have 11 people on Abstract. We should be the #1 stream on Abstract right now, people. Comment, like, tweet, do all of the things. People in the future listening to this on Spotify, follow and rate the podcast. Leave a comment below. Maybe you will help our future Abstract viewership. With all that being said, man, let's move to chapter 2. So let's get a TLDR. And what I'm really interested here in is now you're really evolving into these impacts that you have. One of the things that I've gotten immediately is like, you think deeply, right? And that came through the impact you have at an early age. But now we're starting to get into this high school. If you went to college, Tell me about what's interesting you at the, like, what are your interests at this point? And then let's get into your first big failure.
Yeah, so I did go to college. So I started the Bitcoin Club at my high school, went to the University of Michigan, got a computer
Oh,
science degree
bro.
from there.
Whoa,
You
whoa,
didn't
whoa,
go to
whoa.
Ohio State, did you?
I went to Penn State, so
All right, we're cool. We're cool.
I know we're cool. Actually, I hate Ohio State more than Michigan, but Michigan has beaten us multiple times over the years, so it hurts me a little bit. I'm a big bet football fan, but Michigan's way better than Ohio State. We can agree on that.
Ball don't lie.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so you went to Michigan Bitcoin Club. Very interesting.
Yep, ran the blockchain club at Michigan through the last cycle. Studied computer science, worked at Benzinga while I was in school, basically built out a massive business while I was there. Basically started as an intern and ended up having a team of like 15 to 20 people doing 5 million in annual revenue. All the success that I could hope for as a college student. Graduated, wrapped up, moved to New York, and started working at Alchemy on the account abstraction team there. Basically, I was sick of walking people through the 100-step process of onboarding to crypto, and so I went down the infrastructure solution, which is account abstraction. So joined that team at Alchemy, did technical product marketing from 0 to 2.5 million accounts deployed, and then wanted to kind of tap back into the retail consumer roots. So went to Abstract after Luca put the word out. He was looking for somebody to bring under his wing. We had a 15-minute phone call. I had known him from Benzinga, so we already had that trust there. We had a 15-minute phone call, and that was that. And so that was like 11 months ago. Came into Abstract, saw what they were building. Was infinitely bullish on the team already, but then saw that this product was very aligned with my vision and my passion. And so the rest is history.
Dude, that was too quick. Now we're going to have to rewind and unpack. So when you went to Michigan, what did you study at Michigan?
Computer science.
Okay. And talk to me about this blockchain club, because you did I hear $5 million, like nonchalantly, my $5 million annual revenue? Is that what you said?
Yeah, we were doing SEO content of like how to buy the biggest altcoins. So in the last cycle, if you were to look up like how to buy Shiba Inu, it was my team's article that ranked #1 the entire time. We did over like 100,000 lead clicks to various exchanges from that one article alone. And so we would basically get some type of like incentive for referring people to exchanges. So we would create content that would be like a top of funnel for that exchange, and then we would link them into it and get paid for that. So I very quickly showed my skills and understanding of the crypto space by writing articles, and then down the road was the manager of a team of writers, more focused on like the impact and monetization and the data. Also did a podcast while I was there. Got to do over 100 live episodes interviewing like some big wigs in the traditional finance and crypto space, especially. Put together a conference for Benzinga. But yeah, it was like the crypto guy for Benzinga for the whole entire last bull market, as well as being the crypto guy for the school, and like trying to put the community on to like anybody who was interested or curious about NFTs primarily. I'd just always open doors and Socratic style, where we could meet people where they were at and their understanding.
Dude, beautiful, man. And what I'm really interested in here is this is an opportunity to get into the the practical knowledge, because one of the things I love that Abstract did was really double down on the creator. And I don't like, you can go watch a YouTube on how to write an article that gets 100,000 lead clicks, but like, does it actually apply? And how do you actually get it done? So this whole club getting to monetization, I would love one or two failures or aha moments that you had during this time.
So the club and the monetization were two different things. The monetization was on the Benzinga side, the career side. I think the club is like maybe a more fun thing to talk about.
Okay, perfect.
So we started the first DAO at the University of Michigan. It was in 2021. It was so like cool. There's a lot to go into there, but we'll have to do episode 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. So we started a DAO, and the goal was like, we'll just pool some of our money and then we'll make investment decisions together on chain. We'll see how much we can run it up. And the failure that occurred, which I learned an infinite amount from, is that decentralization is actually a very complicated structure to maintain. And we would have ideas about investments, and we would have ideas about, what to buy, what to hold, what to sell, and we would kind of get shy when it came to actually creating the proposal. And so what happened is we ended up sitting in Polygon, the chain that the DAO was based on. So the native token was Matic. We ended up sitting with the entire fund in Matic for the bull run and outperformed every other trading club on campus combined.
Because you couldn't make a decision.
Because we couldn't make a decision,
Yes.
yeah.
And this is, in essence, again, blockchain's interesting because it comes with this utopia idea, and then you deal with the practical applications of it, right?
Right.
And they always tell you, right, like even a small village, it's something like once you get over like 50 people, right?
Yeah, it's like 140.
Yeah, 140, whatever that number is, it's uncontrollable, right? And it's the same thing with like you saw Bored Ape that went through the same crap, right? And so beautiful insight. What, going through that experience, what are your takeaways in is it just the point, just DAOs are a non-starter in your mind? Are there things about it that you would utilize in a new attempt to create something similar? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that the big takeaway that I had, at least like in the crypto sense, is that decentralization is a direction, not a state. And decentralizing too early can be one of the biggest mistakes that like a project could make. If you have good leadership, you need to have a framework that leans into that good leadership. If you have good engineers, you need to have a framework that leans into those good engineers. So it's like, decentralization it's not black and white, right? You have to have a very intelligent balance of coordination, and like you have to know the people who are a part of that, decentralized organization. You guys have to be like, kind of real about it, right? This is what I would be telling myself, if I was talking to my college self. But yeah, I think like, as attractive as the philosophy of, Bitcoin and decentralization is like there's a level of pragmatism that is required to actually make things happen. And if, the good actors are too afraid to have that level of pragmatism where they become ineffective, that leads to potentially bad actors being the ones who capitalize. So we do have some sort of like moral imperative to draw the line, and just, keep iterating, keep listening, keep being self-aware, and just try to iterate towards a goal and make sure that all of the right stakeholders are involved.
Dude. And it's another beautiful insight here, which I think people, and this is the inherent problem about Web3, is people latch on or glom onto these shiny objects, right? And DAO was that term at the time. But at the end of the day, people, you need a product that people want to buy, and you need a value that you are given, or else it's not sustainable, where, to be blunt, Ponzi schemes are really the thing that have driven this space, a majority of this space. And it's all off speculation, the hope of getting rich overnight. I've said this multiple times, multi-trillion-dollar, billion-dollar industries it's human psychology. We want to believe we can buy that one NFT and then retire and quit work for life. That's Web3 is driven a lot off that. The weight loss industry, right? How many ads on a day are on the internet saying, give me $2,000 and you'll lose 80 pounds in a month? It's just not possible, people. And the same thing is happening here. There's no difference. And it boils down to these principles that we talked about at the beginning, coming full circle, is that all of this stuff is very basic. You still have to have a business. And just because you're using some new shiny word doesn't mean all of a sudden you're going to become magically rich and actually be able to build something effective. Again, why abstract is interesting is because you're trying to build a practical application of what an L2 can be and what consumer crypto can look like, right?
Yeah, emphasis on the latter part. Like, I don't really care what an L2 can be. Like, I care
Oh,
what
of course.
crypto has to offer, like real people, right? Um, but yeah, I think this is probably the least popular thing I'll say today. But like, money you didn't work for is cursed, and go ahead and try and like see what happens. But I think more often than not, it leads to unfulfillment, and like a lack of love. Succession, the hit TV show, I'm a huge fan of it.
So good,
It is
dude.
a
So
tragedy
good.
by definition. It's not a comedy, right? So
No, it's a
yeah,
tragedy.
I don't concern myself with the short term things. I honestly I don't care. People can do whatever they want and have their own incentives and goals, and who am I to judge? But I do like very much have my own philosophy of like building and working for the things that I hopefully earn one day, and that's where I derive my fulfillment, and that's what works for me. So here we are.
Dude, 100% agree. And I just wish Web3 heard this message more. Hence why I do what I do, right? This message is critically important. I talk about it for ad nauseum for years on end at this point. And I'm starting to break through. I promise you the last 6 to 8 months, and this is my next question to you. Now that you're part of the abstract team and you're getting this kind of now abstract's different in the sense that you have this like vetting process, but you're still talking to founders. You have a very good pulse on the industry. I have my own opinions, but I want to hear yours first. How are you seeing the evolution of founders and the people that are trying to build in this space? Are you seeing an evolution? What are you picking up on?
Yeah, founders added the word revenue to their dictionary this year.
Holy shit, it's incredible.
And here's the thing is like, we never had to care about that because it was so easy to generate liquidity with an ICO that like, why would we even bother trying to like build a real business or generate revenue? But very much so that method is kind of played out and like it doesn't work anymore. So the rubber is hitting the road in the sense that building a real business is like now cool again in crypto. Caring about revenue, and generating profit is now cool again in crypto. And it's a sign of maturation. It's one that excites me. But it just takes time for these things to play out. And I'm a ruthless optimist. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, and in proof of what I was saying is, product market fit for my content. No one really cared about these deep connections or what people were really building when they just wanted to know what was the next coin that they could flip for 2000x. And now that real builders are in the space, this content is more meaningful than ever. And that is my proof on my side as a content creator that I'm seeing a fundamental shift, and it excites me, man.
Time reveals all.
Yeah, 100%. All right, man. We got I could probably go another 10, 20 minutes. What I want to do here is give you dealer's choice. We could talk a little bit more about maybe another failure. Actually, I do have one question, I lied, before we get into basically, like you said, we're going to have like 100 more chapters. Maybe we even start something once every couple months. We just catch up and we drop it like it's hot. Who knows what the future holds? I have one question about chapter 2, and then we can go where you want. I have one formal question that I always ask every guest at the end. I'll give you my final comments and we'll call it a day. Chapter 2 question. You answered about kind of crypto specific lesson learned, but starting a DAO and going through these different iterations, people is a huge part of what people experience in business and probably the trickiest thing to deal with. Give me any insights or failures you have learned or take with you through as you're starting to build these things, getting out of college, people in general. Like, how do you think about dealing with people? What are some good leaders that you've had, and what are the quality and traits that you look for?
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Tons there.
Great question. I think like the people are everything at the end of the day. Like, software doesn't matter if nobody's using it, right? So the people are obviously everything. And I do think that the cultural background that an individual has is probably the thing that differentiates them most from the rest of like the market. That was something that was a bit tricky for me to realize. Studying CS, I was like, oh, my biggest advantage would be the technical skill set. Like it wasn't fulfilling to me, so I was at least willing to consider other things. And so, I came around eventually to this realization that the knowledge that I had acquired based on being born the day that I was, and the perspective that I had and the culture that I had because of it, was actually the key to building trust. So in society today, it's like, oh well, this person, they're wearing the same football team that I am, so like they're gonna be my friend now. I think people are kind of simple. Everybody likes to have friends. Everybody likes attention. Everybody likes to talk. And so not overcomplicating the thought process when it comes to like identifying the people that you want to work with and not. It's like if it's not a culture fit, if you don't like the people that you're working with, your work will be 1% of what it could be, even if you're working 24 hours a day. And so kind of leaning into that is like just make sure that you're aligned, like, in terms of vision, the vision has to be aligned, and the vision is based on the insights that a person has. So if you can't relate to that person, if you can't have a conversation with that person, if you can't sit in silence with that person, is that somebody you really want to work with? Is that somebody that brings you joy? Or like, everybody's on their own journey, and it's fine if those people aren't your people. But I think there's a stigma where it's like you have to stay with one team, or you have to stay with one company, and like blah blah blah. But that's like, I think it's very outdated, so we're kind of catching up to that now.
Dude, I'm so glad that you said it, and it's good to hear from your perspective as you're a lot younger than me, decades younger than me, because I've come to the same conclusion too. And this is me personally, and it could be a little bit different for other, because there are people that are way more money motivated than I am. They're way more motivated by, I don't know, traveling or whatever it may be. But my ultimate satisfaction comes from, am I surrounded by people that I believe in and I want to work with? And I do think there are a lot of studies out there that come to show this, right? Is like you have to figure out, and yes, can they be different? Absolutely. But do you respect them? And you don't have to be best friends either, but do you respect them, and do you ultimately get along with them? Because I've had really amazing relationships with people I've respected, but we also disagreed and argued as well too. But that was actually fulfilling as well too, because I was always getting a different point of view. I think people interpret like, do you have to be lovey-dovey and like hugging it out all the time? And I don't think that is the example of people being around that you love and respect. And that's just the number one thing. So I think people at the end of the day, because even in Web3, what does it all boil down to? It still boils down to people. We all have access to the same technology. People are still just like trying to sell you some new shiny object, which is also just repainted the same thing, some other new marketing spin. And the people that outlast are the people that, one, people can relate to, and two, people that they just want to be around. Like, look at Luca, right? Like, he's built a persona around being somebody. Look at Michael Lee, right? Look at yourself. Look at Dyla, right? Like, that's one of the things about the team, is that these people are relatable, kind, and open to having conversations. Unlike anything else that I've seen in the space, and you're doing it right. So it's beautiful. My other question about that though is leaders, right? You've dealt with many leaders throughout this like, let's say, last 3 to 4 years. What are, and I'll force you to pick one. What do you think the greatest trait a leader can have?
Yeah, good question. I don't know which one I'm going to pick, but I can talk about the traits. I think a good leader is often very quiet. A good leader is often listening. I think a good leader lets the group decide what they want to do, and then either vetoes that or supports it with full force. Sometimes leaders can have this sort of, I guess, disconnect where they think because they're the leader, they're supposed to make every single decision. And what that results in is just really unsatisfied, unfulfilled employees who do basically just number crunching or nothing creative all day. And so the good leaders are the quiet ones. The good leaders are the ones that have, immaculate taste and trust in that, 10,000%. But they're often listening more than anything else. And the group will usually come back with a really banger idea, especially if it's the right group. Or in some cases they'll come back with 2 ideas, and then it's up to the leader to break the tie. But the key concept, I think, throughout all of this conversation is that everything is gray, nothing is black and white, right? But everybody likes to take this black and white approach because it's easier to just pick a team and then roll with it. It's easier to outsource your decision making. But the reality is that we don't know much about much in the universe, and so I think it's really key to have that humility and be willing to live in the gray area.
Dude, love that. And some of the worst leaders that I've worked for thought they had the answer to everything. And it's just not even close to the truth. There's just, like you said, no human being can have the answer to everything. It's just impossible. And listening, again, by far anything I've done up to my career and my life to this point, the last 4 years have been the most profound, because that is the skill set I've honed in, is deeply listening. And I urge anybody that is listening now or listens to this in the future, figure out a way for yourself to start deeply listening, because it changes your life fundamentally, immediately. It's one of the things that you can do very quickly, that everybody can do. It's not like you got to go buy a $400 new computer to do this. It's as simple as, and by the way, you can do it all day long. Everybody has relationships. That is one of the keys to success in my mind. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, speaking of leaders, the CEO of Benzinga, great guy named Jason Raznick, started the company in his garage. Is like an incredible entrepreneur to look up to. He had one of these like golden rules, which is Stu is your friend. Stu is STU, seek to understand. I think that is like a really easy definition for like, oh, how do I start listening? Seek to understand, seek to understand, seek to understand. Stu is your friend. And so that type of mindset or framework, hopefully is helpful.
Dude, 100%. That is immediately a short one of like 85 that we could get from this podcast. Seek to understand. It's that simple. We're going to have to get Benzinga. We're going to have to get him on this podcast. I think we could have a fascinating conversation.
I'll see what I can do.
Dude, so let's do this. We'll talk about abstract for about 5 minutes. Like I said, we're going to need many more chapters. And then I got to go watch the little one. So we got to run it down. One, I'm getting feedback. We'd be close to the #1 stream if I had a blue check mark. That comes at like 100,000 XP. What is that? Is that how that works?
Hold on.
I mean, I don't know, man. The blue check mark seems to be a thing. But 2, you told me about you were able to talk to Luca and he brought you under your wing. I'm actually interested in the infrastructure of abstract. Like, do you guys have job postings out? How do you think about the growth of the ecosystem? Or is it really like you're just processed by osmosis right now in the industry, finding the people that align with your mission and vision?
Sorry, I was a bit distracted. I'm trying to get the blue check on for you.
It's all good.
Will you repeat the question?
We don't need to do it right now. The question is, this abstract journey started with you because you were able to have a 15-minute conversation with Luca and talk about what was about to happen. I don't assume you don't have like a job board or job posting. How are you thinking about growing the team and growing this infrastructure? Is it a process by osmosis, making sure you find the people that align with your mission and vision? What are the thoughts there on how you think about structure and growth?
Yeah, we don't have a job board, but there is one job open that Saigar tweeted about. I think he's looking for like a full stack engineer.
Mm,
He's had that tweet up for like a month. I think he just like bumped it yesterday on the timeline because I think we're really picky. Like it has to be number one a culture fit, but then they have to be like one of those 10x people. I think
right.
something we're really hesitant to is grow the team. Um, there's a lot of startups that have tried to hire their problems away, and that's just
Mm,
usually not the right answer.
love
Um,
it.
I think what often happens is that the more people you add, the more risk you take from like a cultural alignment standpoint, and then you become kind of ineffective. The way that it is right now is like everybody's like hyper locked in and on the same page. So we have a team of like 15 people basically, probably like 5 on the go to market side, 10 engineers, if that, right? And yet we're competing with much larger teams. And we're shipping faster. And I think that's because we try to stay as lightweight as possible. There's no rule that says you have to have so many employees to be worth, or to achieve. And so, yeah, we don't really take that into consideration. We're very picky. It is curation at the end of the day. That's what makes Abstract interesting, is that we curate the experience for people who are new to crypto, people who are already in crypto.
Right.
And so, we're very opinionated about our curative sense, our taste.
Dude, I love it. And I thought that was going to be your answer. From your abstract journey, again, one insight or as many as you want to share of what has surprised you about saying, Luca, I'm in, man. Let's do this. What can you share to the audience that is like hardcore abstract or just interested in consumer crypto in general? Maybe something that you were like, "Oh, this is new to me. Didn't think this would be part of my abstract journey."
Yeah, I'll give two things, one good, one bad. The funniest thing to me, this is the bad one, was that when we launched Abstract, I'm like, I know that the experience is 100 times better than anything else that's out there in crypto, but
Yeah.
we saw the very crypto native, heavy MetaMask users push back on like they didn't want to set up an Abstract global wallet, they didn't want to like sign
Yes.
in, they didn't want to create an account, and they were willing to miss out over that, which is a completely separate thing. I think there was a lot of like maybe perhaps ego or just like being jaded, or being too kind of rigid in the old ways. That's like a hesitance to new technology that I
Yeah.
think is very ironic in the crypto
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
But enough about that. The good one that I realized, oh fuck, I had something.
You said you had two. It's okay. Take a deep breath. We're towards the end. And if you don't have it, it's totally cool.
If
I'll
I
give
if
you
yeah, no, I can say a billion good things about Abstract. I just, the one that I was thinking slipped my mind. But the thing that I will say is like probably my favorite part of it is the creator side of things. I've been making YouTube videos since I was probably 9 or 10 years old. Like I've always been obsessed with the creative process and being like a YouTuber and watching Casey Neistat and all these different things. And so having that streaming component to Abstract is obviously something that I didn't expect going into like a chain side role. But it's easily my favorite part, and it's easily something that like I know and I can thrive at. So that's been a lot of fun, and like the part of that that matters is the community and the people. So shout out to everybody who's listening. Shout out to everybody who's streaming. Shout out to you, Mikey G. But yeah, I think like the thing that I love the most about this role is getting to interact with creators and help creators find their voice and help them, watch them succeed. I think there's so many cases of people who were just tweeting and they started streaming for the first time because of Abstract, and now they're like making brand deals and like all these awesome things, and it just makes me very happy and fulfilled. The community is why I get up and work on this every day.
dude. I love it, man. And the thing that I was gonna say from my perspective is the creator. That's what's really impressed me about the whole ecosystem. One, obviously, you've got kind of an interface. You've made it very clean, slick. You've kind of separated it up into logical with gaming, DeFi, whatever it may be. But when I first talked to Michael, and I was like, okay, this is interesting to me because he was just so passionate about the creator economy, but also being practical about it, right? He's been very clear, like, listen, man, it's gonna be very difficult to take over Twitch and YouTube. Not only that, it's insanely expensive. That business model is difficult. So yes, you do have streaming, but are you trying to be the next Twitch? No, maybe, probably
No.
not. But it's a something that is a tool to get people to engage with the ecosystem that is creator first, which is an interesting idea, right? I think it seems like you're going to say something.
Yeah, and it's win-win for the creators too. Like they get to grow and have a personal brand and make brand deals. So it's like it helps us and it helps them. I think the biggest question is like, why didn't anybody figure it out sooner?
Yeah, because it is a simple and because of like you said, like we talked about this whole thing. It's hard to try something new, and then two, that you have the juggernauts of Twitch and YouTube at this point. It's like, well, why are we going to do that? Because we're never going to be able to take them down. But the real thought is, why don't we utilize that? We don't need to be Twitch and YouTube. And how can this tool make our ecosystem more effective? And you guys are proof of that.
Perfect full circle.
And there we are. I'm going to use that as a drop-off point because I'm going to get yelled at that I'm not watching my little human at this point. But I want to talk. I just want to keep on talking. All right. Last question, and then we'll call it a day. You've said it yourself. You've been on multiple podcasts. You've ran your own podcast. You've probably been on thousands of spaces at this point. Would love to hear about how you thought your experience on Mikey G and Web3 went compared to the other things you've experienced.
When can I come back?
Yes, that is what I'm going for. I appreciate it, man. I
appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, man. I work really hard at making sure that you feel comfortable, that if it comes across authentic and genuine, and your response makes me feel like that's what you felt like. So
100%.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. I really, really appreciate it. It literally gives me chills every time I get that feedback because I don't think, and I think I also challenge people to do this too. If you have an idea that you really want to pursue it. And at some point there's a time to quit, but pursue it enough to, you can very, very confidently not prove out that hypothesis, because if you set out something like what my mission was, is this genuine human connection, and then do get the feedback that you have conveyed that and impacted that, there's not many better feelings in the world, man. And so that response, just that simple response, gave me chills. So thank you, man.
Mikey G, the best podcast host in Web3. Let's go.
I appreciate it, man. So my final comments here. Fascinating conversation. It really cooked me off the bat, and the reason why I do the intro call is to make sure people are comfortable with my format. And we already had a really good intro call. And from that intro call, I knew this was going to be a fantastic podcast. What really struck me immediately about you is you didn't have to say much that I knew you were a thoughtful human being. And I don't think this is actually one of the pillars of the company that I built up. The original podcast company is called Midlife Crisis because I went through my midlife crisis, and this is when I decided I found myself and I wanted to create something. But it is learn from everything and think deeply, right? There's just, especially the younger generation, I think can be so reactionary, and even my generation. I think it's just human beings in general. The harder thing to do, and this was a theme throughout this whole conversation, right? The harder thing to do is usually the right thing to do. And the harder thing to do is to not take things for face value, not immediately make a black or white decision, and think deeply about the things that you're saying and why the things that you're doing. And I got that immediately off the bat. So the fact that you can exude that from not saying much, props to you, man. Props to you on that.
Lock in or crash out.
And then two, I can tell you have had a podcast because I think you have, I don't know, via training or this is just your natural voice. Your cadence is fantastic. You have a soothing voice. And I think you understand how to appropriately reply and make me feel comfortable as well, too, right? Like, because it's a two-way street here, you know?
Of course.
And so I felt that too. So I appreciate that. 3, I say this to every guest, and especially to yourself. We're all freaking busy, man. You just gave me an hour and 40 minutes of your time. That is worth a ton of money, and that is not lost on me.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, and thanks, man. And that finally, like I said, we lit that digital campfire, brother. Even though it's winding down, this is the beginning of a friendship. And I think the strongest friendships that happen in Web3, dude, I'm in my 40s. I'm decades older than you. But I think these relationships are the most beautiful thing that spawned from Web3 because we have different perspectives, but yet we have similar values. And what I can bring and you can bring as we continue to learn and grow and do things together, I think the possibilities are endless. So let's continue that campfire, and I cannot wait to do the next one. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me.
All right, brother. And with that being said, sorry, people, but we got to leave. Mikey G and Logan are out.